I'd like to welcome you all tonight to the D5 Supervisor Candidates Forum. This event was organized and co-hosted by the Hayes Valley Neighborhood Association. The Lower Haight Merchants and Neighbors Association. And the North of Panhandle Neighbors Association. And in fact, I'm joined on stage by the president of HVNA, David Robinson. The president of NOPNA, Tim Hickey. And I'm Natalie Burdick. I'm the president of LaHamna. Now, this is actually our inaugural co-hosted event. Yeah. So, hopefully, more in the future. But I'd like to welcome all of you here tonight and thank you for joining us to learn about the D5 candidates' positions on issues, and also to welcome our special guests, the candidates themselves, starting with Scotty Jacobs, Autumn Louian, Bilal Mahmood, Supervisor Dean Preston, and Alan Jones. And I'd also like to welcome our special guest, our moderator for this evening, Matthew Bajeko from the Bay Area Reporter. Special shout out to all the Neighborhood Association volunteers whose work made this event actually possible. So thank you to Dan, Thea, Mike, John, and especially the person who kept us all on task, Heather. I did want to let everyone know that this event is being recorded. I believe it's also being live streamed on Facebook. So feel free. We'll be sharing the information to attendees afterwards where you can actually view it again or share it with other folks. And my last thank you actually goes to the San Francisco Public Library for this fabulous venue. And without further ado, and speaking of fabulousness, Matthew, over to you.
Okay, so a few housekeeping rules to alert the candidates and the audience about tonight, because we have a packed agenda of questions we're going to try to get through. The candidates were not given the questions in advance. There will be no live questions tonight because the neighborhood groups already had asked attendees to send in questions and submitted a list for me to ask all the candidates tonight. Because of the format, there will be no rebuttals. So if the candidates could try to steer your responses to your positions, I will warn you, you will only have a minute to answer all these questions, so not a lot of time. The audience could please refrain from clapping, shouting, making noise because we are recording this, jazz hands or hand silent gestures of up or down, fine. And we have a hard stop tonight at 7:30 p.m. So without further ado, we'll start with the opening statements. And Scotty, you're up first.
All right, thank you. There we go. Good evening. How's everyone doing? Good. It's great to see so many people here. Well, my name's Scotty Jacobs. I'm obviously here running for District 5 Supervisor. I'm here because I believe we need new leadership in City Hall. I'm the youngest candidate running for Supervisor this election cycle. I'm a fourth-generation resident of San Francisco, and my family's roots go all the way back to having a business in this district for over 5 decades. I ultimately am here because I'm proud to be a San Franciscan. And I believe that we need to be building a San Francisco for the future generations of San Franciscans too. When I look at our city, I look around and anyone in this room would probably admit we have our fair share of problems right now. We have 82,000 units of housing that need to be built by 2031. We have a public safety crisis on our streets. We have a downtown and a hollowed out tax base that is not recovered at the rate of other metros across the United States. And yes, these are problems, but I see a lot of opportunity here too. And that is the campaign we have built, is a campaign grounded in identifying the problems, but focusing on the opportunities in San Francisco. It looks like putting thousands of units of new housing in downtown San Francisco and not having supervisors who get in the way of building that housing. It looks like being serious about addressing the public safety challenges that are so prevalent on our streets, being serious about tackling the fentanyl challenges that are prevalent in the Tenderloin all the way to Golden Gate Park. And it looks like investing in downtown recovery and truly supporting small businesses. All of these problems are highly fixable, and we can fix them. I look forward to getting to know all of you and your concerns and being your next District 5 Supervisor. Thank you very much.
Autumn, you're up next.
All right, my name is Autumn Hope Boyan. I am a Caltech educated mom of 5 who came to the city to run a startup and ended up through circumstances I still don't really understand, running the school board recall. I have stood up for the ordinary people of this district under very difficult circumstances, had my name slandered on the streets for you guys to make sure that our people would be taken care of. Most recently, I ran the campaign to bring algebra back to middle school. I worked for a year to make that happen. And now this fall, there are kids, 8th graders, learning algebra in our schools right now who have not had algebra for a decade. That is going to change lives. I want you to know that when you vote for me, you will be voting for someone with a track record of actually getting things done for the regular people of San Francisco, and we're gonna keep on doing it. Now, in District 5, you may or may not know that the Tenderloin was added to our district 2 years ago. I believe that we need to have different leadership in order to solve the problems of the Tenderloin. As much as I adore every other person at this table, I think the Tenderloin needs a little bit of tough love. But when we do that, we can't forget the love. I've been talking to families there. I've been talking to small business owners. And they are suffering. Their kids walk to school past terrible things. Small businesses are barely hanging on. They need our help. We need compassion for everyone in the Tenderloin. And I think we can solve our problems, and we can move forward and restore our reputation. Right now, news crews come from outside, they go to the Tenderloin, and they film things and they say, this is what happens if you listen to San Francisco. We have to get a handle on the issues in the Tenderloin so that we have influence again in this nation, because the nation needs us now.
Thank you, Autumn. And Bilal?
Thank you all for being here. My name is Bilal Mahmoud. I'm a child of immigrants, a renter in the Tenderloin, and I'm running for supervisor to return our district to a beacon of hope. My family immigrated to this country over 40 years ago, and growing up in the peninsula, we would come to San Francisco just to come to the Tenderloin for its food, for its vibrant immigrant community. It was a home away from home. As an adult, it's where I've decided to plant my roots, because it is home. Represents a dream of upward mobility and opportunity. It's also a dream that's now at risk. Thousands of small businesses have closed. I'll just speak loud. Thousands of people have been dying of overdoses on our streets, and thousands of families have been pushed out of our city because it's too unaffordable. City Hall is failing us, and it is time for change. I have a decade of experience from the Obama administration to nonprofits of bridging technology, labor, and business together to get results. In the Obama administration, I helped with small business policy during the previous financial crisis. In the pandemic, I set up a community impact fund to help our workers get a guaranteed income and help protect seniors with bystander training. Over the last year, I helped pass climate legislation with Senator Becker to make sure that decarbonization technology was more affordable for our families. Now in District 5, we want to use that same methodology of bringing people together and driving consensus to focus on evidence-based solutions to tackle our toughest crises, from housing to homelessness to our fentanyl crisis. It's why I propose solutions like a drug market intervention to Built for Zero plan, plans that have worked across the country to curb opioid markets and address homelessness to functional zero. They've worked in other cities across the state and the country, and they can work here in San Francisco as well. I look forward to sharing more with you today, and thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you very much. Supervisor?
Thank you all for being here. I'm Dean Preston. I've been here in District 5 for 28 years. I am a public school parent, an everyday Muni rider, and a long-time tenant rights attorney. And I have been fighting for the residents of this district for decades. And I'm proud of what we've been able to accomplish together. A 21% decrease in street homelessness in District 5. Thousands of evictions stopped. A 50% drop in car break-ins. Community ambassadors in every neighborhood of the district. $10 million for emergency SRO elevator repairs in the Tenderloin, and so much more. While so many people are trashing our city nonstop every day, I have been fighting to make a difference in our communities with so many community leaders. Now, I have never been part of San Francisco's status quo, and I have definitely ruffled my fair of feathers in this town. I've always fought for change. That is what I do, and I will continue fighting for change, the change this city needs. Real public safety solutions, affordable housing, overdose prevention, and yes, a public bank. When you listen tonight, I hope you'll hear the difference between candidates who have a proven track record of delivering results and those who mostly attack and don't have their own record to run on. And I am proud of my track record. I'm also proud that it has been scrutinized by the organizations that you trust who have endorsed me, including the California Nurses, Teachers, the Labor Council, the Tenants Union, Black Firefighters Association, Climate Emergency Coalition, Sunset Movement, Affordable Housing Alliance, Building Trades Council, and so many more. Thank you.
My name is Alan Jones, and among other things, I am the dark horse in this race. I honestly believe that when I moved to the Tenderloin and fell in love with it, I saw more of the challenge that I honestly believe that we all collectively can improve. I'm a longtime San Franciscan. My father brought his 9 children to San Francisco in 1960 as a single father. And his inspiration and how he dealt with people is what motivates and encourages me. I tell people, my father taught me to love, San Francisco taught me to respect, and God taught me never give up. And the respect that I say San Francisco has taught me, I would like to show you how that respect not only took a back seat to some politics and a lot of evil, but I honestly believe that the respect that San Francisco taught me is basically how we are going to rise up from whatever situation we encounter. Respect, respect, respect. It's the only thing that I think is going to help us move forward. And I've read enough newspapers to know that the main thing is we've lost respect for the disabled and senior citizens. And I definitely am not going to let that happen.
Thank you very much, Alan. So I'll remind the candidates you're going to have a minute each to respond to the questions. At the minute mark, you'll hear a cowbell, and that it will be the time to move on. So the first question will go to Autumn, and it's on housing. Will you only support building new housing which has a certain percentage of designated units as affordable, or will you support new housing in general, regardless of whether or not it includes a certain affordable units threshold?
All right, so here's the crux of the situation. Our neighborhoods need to be 30% affordable so that cashiers and busboys can afford to live here. Developers can build at most 15 to 20% affordable. That's all that pencils out. And then the city's going to build affordable housing to fill that gap. So the more affordable housing we can get developers to build, the better. So as your supervisor, I will work with developers to get every possible affordable housing spot in a development, but not so much that it doesn't pencil out. It's gonna look like 15 to 20%. I will work with the mayor to make sure that across our neighborhood we hit that 30% threshold. And I will legalize co-housing so that more than 5 unrelated people can live in a single unit. This is a quick, sensible change for housing people want, and we can make that happen tomorrow.
Thank you, Bilal.
This question represents a specific philosophical difference between me and my opponents here. I believe that we have to build housing at all levels. Sometimes that's at 20%, sometimes that's at 100%. It's going to depend parcel to parcel. But what the fundamental issue actually in San Francisco is our red tape. If you look across the Bay Area, we have the same interest rates, the same economic conditions, but we are the slowest city to build in the entire Bay Area, and it's because of our permitting crisis. I will focus on cutting the red tape so that we can build faster, and we build faster, we build cheaper. This is in contrast to our opponent here, Dean, who has obstructed housing regardless of the financial feasibility. Let's take your favorite project, the car wash in Divisadero. 5 years ago, it was proposed at 20% affordable with neighborhood preference. Dean became supervisor and overpromised at 100% affordable, and the Planning Commission said it wouldn't be feasible above 20. It is now being proposed at 10%. That is lower than when it was promised 5 years ago, so you have a record of financial infeasibility or lower affordability when we start.
Thank you very much. Dean?
Thanks so much. I'll refrain from responding to the disinformation on 400 Divisadero and talk and answer the question. And the question is, I've consistently fought for as much affordable housing as we can get when market rate housing developers are developing, and I share the view that Autumn just said of not to the breaking point. And I have a track record of doing that, getting more affordable housing from developers, because frankly the market rate housing is unaffordable to most of the people that I represent. So I have a track record of supporting market rate housing and affordable housing. I don't think there's anyone on the board that has a stronger record on housing. I have voted to approve 30,000 new homes, 86% of them affordable. If you look in District 5 alone at the projects we're working on, we're talking about over 2,000 units moving forward across 15 sites. So I would encourage those who attack me regularly to get off Twitter and come visit some of those sites with me, including 400 Diviz, where we lined up an affordable housing project before the mayor killed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan?
I think we're putting the cart before the horse. Have you read the San Francisco Standard on a woman who was in a shelter? She got meningitis. She lost half her leg, fingers and toes. She went for housing. The algorithm that they used, she didn't qualify. So how is it that we're going to talk about building all of these housing and we can't even house a woman who lost her leg under the care of San Francisco shelter? I'm saying that if you're going to do something, sure, I understand thinking big. I wake up and dream big. However, we need to start at the bottom.
Thank you. And Scotty?
I think my housing policy is pretty simple, which is we cannot let perfect be the enemy of great. We need to build more housing. It is plain as day, 82,000 units of it, 46,000 that are affordable. I'm glad you think your housing record is so strong. I think it's strong too. 323 units in 5 years of being in office of affordable housing built in San Francisco. That does not make sense. Our district needs more affordable housing. District 5 needs more than 323 units of affordable housing. We need sites like 400 DeViz to be developed. It has been a decade. We need that site built. We need that site built at all levels, because the truth is the only way we hit 82,000 units of housing built is if we build at all levels. So I am not going to be an obstructionist on the Board of Supervisors when housing, and frankly building the housing at all levels, is the issue that is going to affect my generation the most. My generation is the generation looking up and wondering, where are we going to live? Can we raise a family here? And we need people on the Board of Supervisors who are going to support housing at all levels.
So the next set of questions is going to focus on homelessness, and we'll start with Bilal to respond to the first one. The Supreme Court ruled that cities can clear homeless encampments. How does this recent ruling affect your plans for mitigating homelessness?
My focus on addressing homelessness are not Band-Aid solutions. I want to focus on holistic solutions that have actually worked to end chronic homelessness across the country. Because these are not statistics, these are people's lives. I think of Scotty Todd, a friend I met several years ago, who had been homeless for over a decade. He's suffering from addiction, he was on the streets, but through the help of different nonprofits that provided workforce development, that provided housing, that provided mental health and care, he was able to get back on his feet, and he's been thriving for years now. The unfortunate reality is that this was not being provided by the government, because this was in the nonprofit sector. We don't have a money problem in San Francisco, we have a policy problem. And it's the job of the county supervisor to ensure we're delivering these services to our residents. That's why I'm advocating for a Built for Zero plan that consolidates these siloed departments and these siloed services into one centralized department. This framework has worked in 14 cities across the country. It's worked theoretically for Scotty. It can work for so many of our others on our streets in District 5 as well.
Thank you. And Supervisor?
Thank you. So first off, the Supreme Court ruling, the Grants Pass decision, was really unconscionable, saying that homeless people have no constitutional rights and can be swept and criminally prosecuted for being homeless. I think it's absolutely shameful that our city leaders signed onto and brought that case to Clarence Thomas and Donald Trump's Supreme Court. We never should have litigated that case. It has no impact, in my view, on the real solutions to homelessness, which is what we have been working on, which is housing people. And you don't need a Supreme Court ruling to do that. The city does a point-in-time count every 2 years, chronicles how many people are homeless. District 5 homelessness went down 21%. How do we do that? Not by sweeps, moving people from one block to another or one neighborhood to another. By stopping evictions, by actually expanding the number of supportive housing units we have in our district, like when we acquired the Gotham Hotel, 114 new supportive housing units, and very importantly, by filling the vacant units that we currently have, moving people from the street to their homes.
Alan?
I was homeless for 10 years, living in a pickup truck. What did I do? I always voted. I wrote and published a book. I did a ballot measure that received 98,000 votes in the 2018 special election. I wrote it on my cell phone in my truck. And I always kept my truck clean and my body clean. When people talk about the homeless situation, consider this. Some of these homeless people, do you want them living in your apartment building? The point is you do not know the tragic situations that these people are coming from. And to just house them in a building may get them out of your hair, but that's not solving the problem.
Thank you, Alan. And Scotty?
You know, I think the fact that we are at the point where sweeps seem like the only option in San Francisco is really shameful. And I think it's shameful that our city leaders have failed to manage what is a very manageable challenge to the point that that is now what is on the table. I ultimately believe that homelessness is not fundamentally just a housing problem. We cannot deny the fact that there is an interconnectedness between homelessness and mental health and addiction on our streets. And we need to be serious about addressing all three pieces of the equation: economic homelessness, homelessness caused by mental health challenges, and homelessness caused by addiction. I believe that there are certain things that we need to do as a city to make sure that we are helping people who are otherwise, per what we all see when we walk out the doors of this library tonight, dying in slow motion on our streets. Inaction is not compassion. And ultimately, we do need to put every option on the table to make sure that we are helping people get the treatment and resources they need.
And Autumn?
I do support clearing encampments in some cases, but I think we need to acknowledge that we are clearing people's homes. Now, long-term, I would like to see encampments cleared only because of behavior that is impacting the neighborhood. Short-term, we're facing a situation where criminals are taking advantage of our compassion and committing crimes in those tents. There are drug deals, there are rapes, and there are bike chop shops that are all happening in those situations. What I would like to see us do is build the beds and clear the encampments, because I don't think anyone should be sleeping on our streets in the cold and in the rain. We need to have compassionate shelter for people. A lot of the people on the streets, 1/3 of them have mental health issues. We need to bring back mental health beds. We need to bring back drug treatment beds for the 2/3 of people who are on the streets who have drug issues. And for the 400 families on the waiting list for shelter, we need to find them homes so that their kids can have a stable environment to go to school and succeed.
Thank you very much. So the next question is, many individuals experiencing homelessness also suffer from mental illness or are addicted to drugs. Should housing be contingent on abstinence and or mandatory treatment? And we'll start off with Supervisor Preston.
Thank you. No, I don't think housing should be contingent, and I think that that's different from saying that we should build housing, sober housing, as well as other housing. But I don't think it should. I don't think people should be rendered basically homeless because of an addiction or mental illness. Let me say this: it is very hard in this country and certainly in this city to have a serious discussion, especially in an election year, about drug policy. Like, there is a reason that we have this crisis in this country and on the streets of this city, and it is often because we lack leaders who will tell the truth and follow evidence-based practices, especially in an election year. I am very proud that when I came to office, after the Tenderloin was moved into our district, we championed the city's first overdose prevention plan. And you know what? When we follow that plan, overdoses go down. And when we do stupid things like closing the city's only safe consumption site, overdoses go up.
Thank you very much.
Public health
Please refrain from clapping so we can get through all the questions tonight. Alan, you're up next.
June 16, 2016, I got a phone call. My brother, who was in a San Francisco hotel, had died from a fentanyl overdose. Now, he was brought to the hotel by the city with the instructions, do not use any drugs. Well, when we went to clean up his apartment room, I was standing outside. People were asking me if I wanted drugs right out the front door. So how is it that we are going to say we need to get these people in certain places, and then you flip the switch and don't even enforce the rules for staying in these places? My brother died because San Francisco did not care enough to make sure there was not drug dealing outside the front.
Thank you very much. And Scotty?
So I do believe that sobriety and abstinence from drugs should be a requirement for housing. They're the hisses. Thank you. It's glad to know you're all here. Every time. There's a reason we do have the drug crisis on our streets, and it's because of failed policy. And I'm a candidate who is very clear about what I think we need to do as a city to make sure that we start attacking the root cause of the addiction crisis on our streets. I'm very clear about the fact that I do think we need to amend our sanctuary city policy to create a carve-out for the drug dealers who are on our streets in San Francisco. The reason for that is because it makes no sense that you would offer the same degree of legal protection to someone here with political asylum rights as someone who is here profiteering off of addiction and mental illness. That makes no sense. We need to vote yes on Prop 36. It is one of the many pieces of legislation that will help us get the city going on the right track, and we need to unequivocally stand with a fully funded SFPD. We need the resources and tools on our streets to attack the addiction crisis head on, and that starts with the supply of drugs. Thank you.
Autumn?
So no one gets better from addiction or mental health issues on this cold of their streets. But also, I don't think we should be sheltering people forever with no requirement to get clean because we are failing in our duty to actually help them. I think we should have sober housing, but we also need to be pushing people into treatment. We need to be compelling treatment in some cases because it does work for some people and it does get their lives back on track. And I think that is the goal here. The goal is to get people into recovery. The goal is to get people their lives back. And the goal is to make sure that we don't slip over with the best of intentions into enabling things that are going to derail people's lives. I have talked with people who have lost 10 years of their lives to drug use when, if they had been pushed into treatment earlier, they would have had those lives to do the things they really wanted.
Thank you very much. And Bilal?
I live in the Tenderloin, and I see the crises on our streets every day, and I think of the families and the children, my neighbors, who had to leave. I think of my former neighbor, Leonard, who, in his words, died 3 times on the streets of the Tenderloin because he could not escape the fentanyl dealers who made it impossible for him to recover. Thankfully, he left the neighborhood and now he's in recovery. What we need to do is focus on shutting down these opioid markets and tackling and arresting the fentanyl dealers and using evidence-based approaches to do so, like a drug market intervention strategy, an evidence-based approach that's cut opioid markets across the country. It starts with declaring emergency powers for long-term preventions. Unfortunately, in 2021, Dean voted no on the Tenderloin emergency plan that actually started the safe consumption site that he now complains is gone. We also need to streamline arrest by fully funding the Drug Market Agency Coordination Center, which also in 2023, Dean was the sole no vote on funding $5 million for that program as well. He's actively opposed the components of a plan that would help, and I will work tirelessly
Thank you very
to
much.
that damage.
So this next question is kind of similar. There are 2 schools of thought for treating drug addiction: harm reduction and conservatorship. Which of these 2 schools speaks to you more and why? And we'll start off with Alan.
I don't subscribe to either. I don't know what's going to get somebody off of drugs. Whether it's harm reduction or abstinence or whatever, I don't know. All I know is people who are in situations where they have a drug problem are crying out for us to solve it. And I think they're going to the wrong people. Because nobody up here has the answer. I don't know why people think that we have the answer by sitting in a room and saying what works best when we know there's 50% of us say one thing and 50% of us say the other. We need to get together with each other, not tell everybody else what can happen. We're not going to solve this problem. It's not going to be solved anytime soon.
Thank you very much. And Scotty?
So I think both are part of the solution, harm reduction and conservatorships. It's about the entire continuum of care. And my perspective is that right now we are just skewed too far toward one side of the equation. And the reason I feel this way actually comes from walking down Willow Street in the Tenderloin, where if anyone's walked down Willow Street, it's sort of ground zero of the addiction crisis on our streets right now. And I talked to someone named Bear, and Bear told us, I have cellulitis, I have MRSA, I can't get the treatment I need, I want to get better, I don't know how. We asked him where he was going later in the day, he said to go pick up more needles. Bear wants to get better. Bear cannot access the resources that are available. How many bears, of the hundreds of people that I saw on Willow Street that day, are seeking the help and resources they need to get better and can't do it, and the city is failing them. We need to invest in the continuum of care. We are over-investing in harm reduction as a standalone strategy right now, and we need to take a more balanced
Thank you very
approach.
much. Autumn?
When you look at harm reduction versus conservatorship, what I see is, I don't see that as the dividing line. What I see is we want to stop the behaviors that are harming the neighborhood while also being compassionate and getting people into treatment with whatever method works best for them. That may look different for different people. I think we should have a range of options for treatment, and I think we should compel people into treatment when we need to, because the alternative is to do what we're doing now, which is walk by them as they're overdosing on the streets and say, we're gonna wait until you're ready for treatment. I don't think that's compassion. I think compassion sometimes looks like saying, we love you, and we're gonna get you into treatment because we love you and we want you to get better.
Thank you very much. Bilal?
I also believe we need a spectrum of care to help those suffering on our streets. There's been a 7% increase in overdoses in the Tenderloin, while there's been a 7% reduction in every other neighborhood across the city. We are moving backwards while the city is moving forwards, and it requires new leadership through a balanced approach. We have to have safe consumption sites at the beginning of continuum of care. So many people die of overdoses because they don't know they're taking fentanyl, and it's 10 times as potent, and so that causes the overdoses when that happens. But that's a gateway. We also need to provide sober housing in that option because we're not investing enough. There's new proposals at the Board of Supervisors for sober housing requiring 25% of new affordable housing that's built to be sober and drug-free as well. The Cash Not Drug program, providing positive incentives for people to get into recovery and compensating them, incentivizing them to do so. That's what I'm going to focus on, a balanced approach that holds people accountable but also provides positive incentives for them to stay into recovery.
Thank you. And Supervisor?
Thank you. I think there's no tension other than those who want to create a tension for political reasons between harm reduction, treatment, and conservatorship when the legal standards for conservatorship are met. I don't know anyone who is a fan of harm reduction who does not also believe in supporting people getting into treatment. Let me say this, and before I go further, and I should have started, Alan, I'm very sorry for your loss, and thank you for sharing your personal story with us. I want to also agree with something that Alan said, which is that in some ways politicians don't know the answer. I actually agree with you on that, which is why when it comes to a public health crisis, we in political leadership are at our best when we follow the recommendations of public health professionals and leaders. That's what we did in the pandemic. That's why we had the lowest death rates here, because we stepped aside and we followed the recommendations. We need to follow the overdose prevention plan created by the Department of Public Health in partnership with our office and the mayor. We are not following.
Thank you very much.
We need to.
So this question was submitted by an audience member. It has to do with community safety issues. And the person wants to know if there isn't a deadly weapon involved, the San Francisco Police Department doesn't seem to take action. This person has witnessed everything from fistfights to underage drinking parties happening on the streets until the early morning hours, with the SFPD responding, "We can't do anything." How will you address the concerns plaguing our neighborhood and ensure the police department is actively policing the streets? And we'll start off with Scotty.
Well, there's a fundamental choice for you all as voters among some of the folks sitting at this table. There's someone here who thinks we should defund the police. There's some folks who think the police should remain understaffed. I believe that we need to restore the SFPD to full staffing levels. And the reason for that is because we are currently 15% understaffed. We have a retirement bubble in SFPD that is about to pop. And we also have a cadet class of 17 cadets that was delayed because we cannot effectively recruit new officers to the force. That is a public safety problem in a nutshell. We need to support SFPD in their recruitment efforts to backfill the retiring officers who are on their way out the door. We need to pass Prop F on the ballot, which enables us to retain officers for longer. But we also need to make sure that we are ultimately standing with the officers when they are showing up, not just in the bad times. A fully funded SFPD means more beat cops. I spoke in the Tenderloin last week. Every single person there said, why don't we have more beat cops in our community? We need to support the police.
Autumn?
All right, so it's true that the police often do not respond to these kind of like less critical calls, but I can tell you that if you have an arsonist in your neighborhood at 4 a.m. like I had 2 weeks ago, they are there in 5 minutes. The reason they do not come to your neighborhood is because they are fighting bigger fires, sometimes literally. But in order to fix this, we need to fully staff the police so that they have the capacity to respond to our calls. We need to staff the police with good and compassionate people, ideally people from the community who understand the full complexity of our neighborhoods, and people who will treat everyone with the respect and care that they deserve when they are going through what is almost universally a horrible, horrible situation if you have to call the police.
Thank you. Bilal?
Community safety is a top priority for me, and we need to, in this election, send a clear message that San Francisco is not a lawless city. That starts with acknowledging that theft, drug dealing, gun violence, these are already illegal. What we need is a fully staffed police department to make sure the laws are enforced. And this is personal for me. Just 2 weeks ago, the restaurant I've been going to since I was 8 was broken into. They had their cash register stolen, they had their iPad stolen. They were trying to figure out what to happen. They couldn't get a response from the police. I'm sorry, Dean, I think they know you were supervisor, so they called me instead. I escalated it to the police command, and what I was told was there was the shooting at Powell Station that same day, and they had to divert resources. Police should not be understaffed to the level where they have to decide which residents to support when they're in crisis. When this is happening, Dean has voted 3 times to vote to defund the police. He's been so anti-police that he called President Biden a national disgrace for funding police. My focus is on addressing our police staffing crisis. The president deserves to feel safe.
Supervisor.
Residents absolutely deserve to feel safe, and we've led on efforts, including community ambassadors, in every neighborhood of District 5 for the first time. But we also do something that's really in short supply in San Francisco, and it's something I don't think you get out of, and certainly anyone to my right here, and that is actually oversight of the police department. And since I came to office, the police budget has grown by over $200 million, and I've said it before at these hearings, and I will say it again. The issue is not just police staffing, it is how those resources are used. You could cut from the police department and no one would even notice it because they are deploying so much overtime to areas that don't make us safer, and they are funding things like a mounted horse unit and a massive communications budget to do promotional videos. So I am one of the few people who will actually exercise oversight of the police department. That is my job. I am not a rubber stamp for the police department. I work with the captains to do as much as I can to keep our neighborhoods safe.
Thank you very much.
I don't like to tell the police how to do their job. I really don't. But a situation that I came across, I sent the video to SFPD. And I can honestly tell you, I had to send them a thank you because it was such a great turnaround from what the problem was. By citizens doing more than their part, I think that we can help this situation. I'm just a citizen, and I saw something that was out of control, and I got to my Tenderloin Station officer, and they fixed the problem. And I think that we all need to help the police. And I'm not for increasing police staff, but I voted for Prop E, and I've seen what those...
Thank you very much. So the next question is going to focus on help for small businesses. We'll start with Autumn, and it's a very direct question. How would you help make things easier for small businesses throughout District 5?
I'm going to start by showing you this map. Every red X on here is a business in the Tenderloin that closed. When I go speak to the small businesses in the Tenderloin, they tell me the same thing at every single stop. Most of them have my cell phone number now. They tell me we need clean, safe streets. We need clean, safe streets. We need clean, safe streets, because that's what's killing our businesses. The customers don't come. And we're dying here. I talked to one woman at 1 p.m. and she had sold 1 bowl of soup. They need our help. They need our help getting a handle on the drug crisis in the Tenderloin that's causing most of these issues. And they also need the city to stop citing them for things like iron gates that have been there for 34 years without a problem until an inspector comes by and says, you need a permit for this. It's going to cost you $900. And then you spend all week at City Hall getting 6 different stamps of 6 different departments when your business is struggling.
Thank you. Bilal?
Small business has been a consistent focus of my career. I was a policy analyst in the Obama administration during this previous financial crisis, helping small businesses get access to capital. And now, in a current financial crisis here in San Francisco, I think of my friend Shorty, who runs a barber shop on DeViz. And he was struggling during the pandemic. He called Dean's office and he was worried he couldn't pay his employees and he'd have to shut down. The response he got was he should get a different job. That lack of support from the government, it's on record, you can check it out. The lack of support from City Hall is why so many small businesses feel they are not going to get support, and it's because of your record. In 2022, you voted no to fund graffiti cleanup. In 2023, you voted no on $5 million in small business grants. Instead, you've allocated money to SF Safe, a corrupt nonprofit that profited off these businesses' misfortune. Larceny is up 16%, thousands of businesses closed. Small business is crucial to San Francisco. We need a supervisor who's going to prioritize their needs.
Supervisor?
Thank you. We're going to need a Trumpian level fact checker for this one. And let me say this, make up what you want about your record. Tell everyone you're a neuroscientist and pretend you work for Obama and so forth. But please don't insult my staff that works hard every day to respond to thousands of people in our district. I don't think I'm a former small business owner, the only one up here. I'm the former co-owner of Cafe du Nord, the nightclub on Market Street. I know what it's like to run a small business and how tough it is. I'm proud of our small business work, which includes banning small business evictions during the pandemic, the only law in the country to waive small business back rent during the pandemic, the only law in the country to actually provide victim assistance to vandalized businesses and treat them as the crime victims that they are, and community ambassadors and enhanced street cleaning at the request of all of our merchant quarters. Do we have more to do in the Tenderloin? Absolutely. Our neighborhoods, though, are coming back strong.
All right, I have homework for you all. I saw there was a business that opened at the corner of Market, Golden Gate, and I think Taylor. It's a taqueria. I have said that I will put $100 into any new business that opens up in the Tenderloin. I went in there for tacos. No, I didn't buy $100 worth of tacos. But I did buy tacos, and I will be back. Now, if everybody in here went to that taco place, you will prove my point on how we can handle this situation. Now, if you don't, you prove my point.
Thank you very much. Scotty?
Alan, I'll go eat tacos with you sometime. Yeah. Campaigning makes you hungry. Yeah, look, I believe small businesses are the backbone of our neighborhoods, and neighborhoods are frankly one of the things that makes San Francisco such a special city. And so I think we need to support small businesses. I put forth what I call a 2+2 plan for small businesses, which is that any business that's within its first 2 years of operating or is under $2 million of revenue would qualify for special tax exemptions on a scaling basis on their gross receipts taxes to ultimately create the right financial on-ramps for businesses and the entrepreneurs who are taking risks to start things in our communities. I think that's a key. Support the entrepreneurs. But I also want to talk about where we're failing small businesses. We have a corner in our district where there's the Hibernia Bank building, the proper hotel, and a ton of access to transit. The Hibernia Bank is losing 90% of its business leads because of street conditions right now in the Tenderloin. The proper hotel is an open-air drug market almost every single night. That is a failure of leadership. It is a failure of leadership on the topic of public safety. We need more. We need more from our elected leaders.
So the next question has to do with shared spaces and specifically the proxy site, which was just in the news. We're going to start off with Bilal, and the question is, District 5 residents have mixed feelings about Parcel K in Hayes Valley. Some believe it should be maintained as proxy, a shared community gathering place, and some believe it should be used for affordable housing. What is your position on this?
I think it's a false choice. Hayes Valley has had to choose for so long between a housing and a community space, housing and a grocery store. We can do both. This parcel's been debated for 20 years. Dean's had 5 years to do it, and he's failed. And in the last forum, Dean, you spent the time blaming the community and members of this audience for the lack of progress when it's your responsibility as supervisor to listen to the community, not tell them what you want, but to find ways to get to a compromise and a consensus. If you did listen, you'd know there's a compromise. We're mixed-use development. An atrium on the ground floor, preserve the pop-ups, preserve the proxy, build housing above, change the laws if you need to get more housing above. But Dean is turning this into a campaign issue because he wants to turn the proxy, no pun intended, into a proxy battle because it's an election year. He'd rather distract from the fact that he hasn't built 196 affordable units in 600 McAllister, that there's a parcel R that's city-owned that could be housing, and parcel S that's city-owned that could be housing. You're turning this into a campaign issue to mask your own failure.
Thank you. Supervisor?
600 McAllister, which we forced the developer of 98 Franklin to acquire for 100% affordable housing, so we're excited to build those. Let me say this, Parcel K, this is a city-owned site that has been designated for affordable housing. It should be affordable housing, and I'm concerned if there's any candidate for District 5 Supervisor who will not unequivocally say this should absolutely be affordable housing without further delay. I was proud to be the only candidate who was actually out there with all the community members who gathered this week and the 1,600 members of the community who signed a petition saying they want affordable housing without further delay. And let's not forget, this is a neighborhood from which people were displaced. Working class families, African American residents were displaced, and there was a promise to build affordable housing on Parcel K, and we are going to do it. It's not a question of if, it's when. And yes, we'll have ground floor retail so those small businesses can be back in there after the construction. Thank you.
Thank you.
As a black man living in San Francisco since 1960, I don't trust any promises that have been made, especially this 20-year promise for Parcel K. I can unequivocally say, I'm not for it. I believe that what a proxy did in a pandemic should be applauded. It used its creativity to help in a time of need. And now we want to just push them aside because we want to fulfill a promise we made 20 years ago. I didn't make that 20-year-ago promise, and I can guarantee you, 20 years from today, that I'm not going to keep that promise. We need to move on.
Thank you. Scotty?
I think Parcel K is a critical third space in the Hayes Valley community, and I've been very clear that I think there is a middle ground alternative approach to developing Parcel K that actually leads to the net increase of the number of affordable housing units we build in San Francisco. This is something that became law 30 years ago. Something else that was law 30 years ago is that I couldn't have married another man, but laws change, things evolve, and we need to look at the conditions of communities. I know you're all still here. Gotta look at the conditions of the communities where we are empowered to lead and make the right decisions by listening to those community members. I have not talked to a single person in Hayes Valley who does not say, I want more affordable housing and I want it in Hayes Valley. They ask, why are we not building it at 130 Fell? Why are we not buying that site from the school district, which if you haven't read recently, is having some financial problems? Why aren't we thinking more creatively about where we can build the housing, more units, build it taller, build it denser, don't disrupt the small businesses, and ultimately make good on the promises of 30 years ago at the same time.
All right, it's getting spicy in here. All right, I'd like you to raise your hand if you believe in affordable housing. All right. Dude, where are you guys? Come on! All right, Now keep your hand in the air.
The journalist should take a picture right now.
Now, keep your hand in the air if you would build an Alamo Square. Keep your hand in the air if you would tell Japantown, Osaka Way is big enough. Let's put affordable housing on the Peace Plaza. Hayes Valley has built 539 affordable homes in the last 15 years. It has built, and it will continue to build affordable housing because the neighborhood loves it. But not on its town square. Because the people in the affordable housing deserve vibrant community spaces too. They deserve their carnival. They deserve their movie nights, and they deserve running into their neighbors in the park because we all do. We all do.
Thank you. No clapping. I have a lot of questions to get through. Once again, don't make me talk to you after. So on to a less controversial topic, transit. And this one we'll start with the supervisor. And this comes directly from an audience submitted question. Oak Street and Fell Street feel like dangerous freeways with noise, high speed, and accidents. What are your plans for these streets, and how can we shift people from cars to bus, bike, or walking?
Thank you for the question, although you told everyone to stop clapping right before you asked me about transportation and transit, so I have a little issue with that. I'm the transit nerd on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. I ride public transit every day and have for 30 years. Absolutely love public transportation and fought to bring back our bus lines that were suspended and slated to be permanently removed during the pandemic. Also held off fare hikes for 3 years by battling that. On Oak and Fell specifically, and thank you for that question, we did the parking protected bike lane on Fell all along the Panhandle, and we got the money and have the designs to do the same thing on Oak Street, which has not only provided a great east-west path for cyclists, it's also brought speeds on Fell and Oak by the Panhandle down. I'm proud of my slow streets work across the district, including Page and the Golden Gate Greenway, unequivocally support creating safer and slower streets. I also think on Fell and Oak, we should have a dedicated bus lane. Thank you.
Well, since it's obvious I don't use public transportation, I use this. And I'll use my time to say, I have for 2 years tried to get San Francisco to do what smaller cities are doing, and that is public electric wheelchair charging stations. And I have run into some problems when I sent this to all members of the Board of Supervisors, crickets. I did receive one response, very nice, but it fell on deaf ears apparently. It was Supervisor Dean Preston's office. His lovely assistant did reply to my inquiry, but it dropped dead, and I don't know why. We need public electric wheelchair stations here, and if you haven't seen...
Thank you very much, Scotty.
You should.
Well, I'll say transit is, I think, such a source of civic pride in San Francisco. I don't think there are a lot of cities where you see people routinely wearing Muni merch when they're walking around the city, and I think that's a really cool thing. I also think that it's critical that everyone does their research and hopefully votes yes on Prop L on their ballots this year. That is a critical transit funding initiative. It is one of very few things that I know we do agree on. I think it's important to acknowledge when you do agree with your political opponents. That being said, the way that we reduce the risk on Fell and Oak and other busy streets like that throughout District 5 and all of San Francisco is by doubling down on transit. If we're going to add 82,000 units of housing in San Francisco, we cannot operate under the assumption that every single one of those households is going to have a private vehicle. 1, we don't have the space for the roads. 2, that's just not good policy. 3, I don't want to sit in that much traffic when I'm on Muni. So, we need to invest in expanding Muni service. We need to invest in a connected bike lane network across the city. We need to invest in all forms of transit that are alternatives to private car vehicle ownership.
All right. I think as we are working on getting people onto public transit, I do, first I want to address the issue on Oak and Fell. I think that bike lane on on Felt is great. It has reduced speeds. I love it. I also think having self-driving cars will actually help with a lot of the issues because it will because it means that people don't have to own private cars anymore. I ride the bus everywhere. I love the bus. And I do think we need to get more people into buses. The thing we haven't talked about here is that we need our bus network to be fast and reliable in order to get more people on board and not lose ridership. We are facing budget issues. Starting in 2026, we are facing an over $200 million budget gap that we are going to have to fill. And it is important to me that we preserve every bus line in the city, keep them fast, keep them frequent, so we do not lose ridership when that happens.
Thank you very much. Bilal?
District 5, specifically the Tenderloin and Hayes Valley, has some of the highest traffic collision corridors in the entire city. And we have to work on making safe and reliable transit. So automated speed cameras is something I've supported before. We got 100 across the city. I'm going to advocate with partners in the state to get more to District 5. But what's missing from this conversation, you can't be a true transit champion unless you support housing near transit as well. The reason is, if you live in the Tenderloin, everyone knows John, who's a power washer here. Everyone also knows that he commutes 3 hours every day from Lodi because he can't get enough live in affordable housing near transit here. And that's partly a consequence of Dean again. He has voted consistently against housing near transit corridors. He voted against nearly housing 800 people at 469 Stevenson near a BART station. He voted against SB 50 and a resolution on the board. SB 50 would have built thousands of units of housing near transit corridors in District 5. The Chronicle editorial board, Dean called that vote a temper tantrum by the most anti-housing governing body in the state. And this is a pattern of obstruction, and that's what we need to change.
Thank you. We're moving on. So the next question will start with Alan, and it's also submitted by an audience member. Affordability, safety, and access to grocery stores are all issues making it harder for parents to raise children in the district. What would you do to make San Francisco and District 5 more family friendly?
Since I have no children, I have to just say, honestly, I'm going to pass on this question. I would prefer parents answer that question.
Scotty?
I'm not a parent. Definitely not a parent. But after the election, if anyone wants to, go grab a drink sometime, I'm open to the idea, No one wants to date candidates. Drives well. What I will say is, I think this question does actually hit really close to home, though, because of everyone on this stage, I'm of the age group where a lot of my friends right now are thinking about wanting to start a family. And they're thinking about, can I actually do that in San Francisco? Can we afford to do it in San Francisco? Are the schools good enough? How do we get around? Do we need a car? There's so many questions that come up. The first thing we can do to make San Francisco a city for families is build more housing at all levels. Because if we can affect the housing affordability crisis in our city, we can make this a city where families can thrive. I am proud to support universal childcare. That is a meaningful step that we can put forth as a city. That is something Mark Farrell has put forth as well. I'm proud to be endorsed by him, the only candidate. More transit is critical, and also investing in parks and schools.
So I do know the next respondent is a parent, so Autumn.
All right. I'm not only a parent, I'm a mom of 5 raising a family in the city, although our oldest is off to college now, so the load's a little lighter. So I have time for this. The major reason families leave the city is sometimes affordability, but it often happens when they're entering our school district. They are worried about the lottery system, especially if they're assigned to a school across town. That's really hard for working families. Or they hit junior high and they're concerned about academic excellence. Our schools did not teach algebra in middle school for a decade. I worked for a year to make that happen and to bring algebra back so families could feel confident that their kids would get an education with a high bar, but also the support for kids who have fallen behind so that they don't have to be behind forever. And so we're doing them a favor by getting them the education they deserve. And for grocery store access, I am the only candidate, apart from Dean, who was at the Fillmore Safeway meetings listening to the community's concern as their grocery store is slated to close.
Thank you very much.
In January, right after I take office.
Bilal?
I have so many friends who've left the city as soon as they have kids because they don't have faith in our public school systems here, and that's what we need to invest in. My mom was a librarian, my grandma was a special ed teacher. I grew up in the public school system for most of my life, and anyone would tell you that the public school system is failing here. Our teachers aren't being paid on time, their health insurance is failing. They lack the housing. We need to get our city back on track to the basics of fixing these problems and not have supervisors who perform performative grandstanding. Because we've had a supervisor who's only focused on performative votes year after year. Dean, if you don't trust it, just go look up it on the city website. But in 2023, you were the sole no vote on increasing minimum wage for youth child care workers. 2023, you were also the sole no vote on $1 million in funding for the public library that we're in here right now today. You can check it online. These families, these votes could have supported were clearly less important to you than making a public statement. You say you're for the people, but your votes tell a different story.
Thank you. And Supervisor?
Thanks. Give me extra time. I'm happy to respond to all of this information about my votes. Let's talk about families. Absolutely one of the most important things, housing security for families. That's why I actually wrote the law that prevents eviction of families during the school year, as well as educators. It's why we tax the rich to build educator housing to make sure that not only we have kids in schools, but their teachers can actually live in San Francisco. It's why we launched the biggest rent relief program locally of any city in U.S. history to save 20,000 people from eviction. So we can talk about keeping families in San Francisco, but we've actually been doing that work. We also need to focus on safety. That's why I support safe passage programs and the ambassador programs that we've brought to every district, every part of our district. And let me say this, the school debacle right now is an absolute disgrace. All the families, I am a public school parent. I know the anxiety throughout the school district because they have so completely botched the announcements around school closures and consolidations.
Thank you very much.
And delayed those announcements.
So we're going to stick with a housing question here, and we'll start with Scotty with this one. What kind of protections will you propose for renters in the district, and how can you make sure families stay in District 5 instead of being priced out?
Yeah, I love this question. The reason is because I fundamentally believe rent control is one of the most incredible tools that we have at our ability to make sure that we stabilize tenants and keep them in San Francisco. Now, there's some fundamental policy differences at this table around how we do that. I have come out very publicly saying that I am no on Proposition 33 because I do not think it does the right exact details around how we actually go about stabilizing rents. The number one thing that we can do to keep San Francisco housing affordable is to build housing, and to build housing at all levels. Proposition 33 opens the door to rent control on all new construction, which will kill all new development in San Francisco. If there is no new development in San Francisco, we do not meaningfully address the housing affordability crisis in San Francisco. What I am in favor of is creating a rolling 28-year lag on how we add to the rent-controlled housing stock in the long term. By doing so, we continue to incentivize new development, which ultimately helps us move the needle on affordability,
Thank you very much,
while
Scott.
also adding to the long-term rent-controlled housing stock.
Autumn?
We're actually doing, in many ways, a good job keeping families in their home in the city. We have rent control, and Proposition C provides a lot of money to people who are facing short-term problems making the rent, so that people stay in their homes instead of being put on the streets. We should continue both of these as exactly as they are. But we do have 400 families on a wait list for shelter right now, and this is happening because they're fleeing terrible conditions in other countries, or they're here for other reasons, but they need to be sheltered too. We need to be spinning up more family housing, and it shouldn't be congregate shelters. It should be interim housing where people can get on their feet, find jobs, where kids can have a stable place to learn during the school year, so they're not disrupted by moving from place to place to place to place on our sidewalks.
Thank you. Bilal?
I've been a renter my whole life, for 10 years living in San Francisco, and as many renters, I've moved 6 times. Every time my landlord lifted the rent or tried to sell their place. So it's a personal experience that I know intimately that many of you here share as well. To protect renters to be able to stay in their home, we have to protect rent control. The landlord currently in my current place is raising my rent. Unfortunately, I don't live in a rent-controlled apartment. And so I do support Prop 33 because it will help keep people where they are and reduce displacement, which has been such a continued and disparate history in this district. But I also think that we need to build housing at all levels, affordable, middle income, market rate, because our workers and our teachers and our firefighters that deserve to live here and they don't qualify for just below market rate, they overqualify and they have to get market rate housing as well, and we have to make that cheaper. Unfortunately, we've had a supervisor who's opposed housing near BART station, he's opposed hundreds of units of housing at 450 of Farrell, he's opposed housing, thousands of housing next to a hospital, he opposed housing for shade.
Thank you very much, Supervisor.
Thank you, and please spare us the struggling renter thing. You dumped $600,000 of your own dollars in your last run for office. Insult to the renters in this district, and this district is almost 90% renters. And I want to say this, it matters to the renters that I represent in this district. That for 20 years of my life, I have been dedicated to advancing renters' rights, to saving rent control when the big landlords try to abolish it in this state, from creating a right to counsel so that tenants have an attorney for free if they face an eviction, for launching the biggest rent relief program in the country that I mentioned earlier that saved 20,000 people from eviction. Like, these things matter in a deep way. That is part of why I was elected 4 years ago, and it's why I hope I am re-elected so I can continue protecting renters from displacement. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Alan?
I'd like to respond at this point.
There's no rebuttal. Alan?
I'm not opposed to any developer who wants to come in San Francisco and put up a building. What I find real strange is I've seen a real tall building, very fancy, downtown. It's about 90% vacant. I don't know how that happens in San Francisco, as expensive as it is. Why is the city allowing these tall buildings to be erected and then stay empty? I don't get it. And that's something that I will look into. I don't have the answer. But once I do find the answer, I guarantee you, I'll be bad enough to change it.
Thank you very much. So this question actually comes from me. I would be remiss working for the LGBTQ newspaper if we didn't ask a gay-specific, queer-specific question. As was mentioned earlier, the redistricting process moved the Tenderloin into District 5. It's famous for its transgender districts, one of the first recognized anywhere in the world. So if you become supervisor or remain on the board, Dean, what policy would you push for to help queer and trans residents, not only in the Tenderloin, but throughout District 5, as it's long been home to LGBTQ residents, and famously once was represented by Harvey Milk. And we'll start this with Autumn. You only have a minute.
I know, I'm thinking. So I support our queer and trans residents, and one thing I've heard is that when trans kids move here from other states where they're facing a lot of discrimination, they often end up on the streets because they have nowhere to live. There's nowhere affordable to live. They're not coming here with buckets full of money in their pockets. We shouldn't be tossing them into congregate shelters. We should have compassionate spaces for them to be in so they can be safe and so they can be supportive, and ideally places where they can talk to other people who are going through the same thing. So that's what I would really do first for that community.
Thank you. Bilal?
I live in the transgender district, and I'm proud to be endorsed by the founder, Honey Mahogany. And a lot of the issues that face in this community are hate crimes and hate incidents that have been ignored for too long in the community. There's been a double-digit increase in hate incidents, hate crimes across the city affecting the LGBTQ community, but also the Arab communities, the Muslim communities, the Jewish communities. And that's why when I became a member of the Democratic Party, I issued a resolution immediately that passed unanimously to declare hate crimes and hate incidents against all of these communities a public health crisis. So that we would, as supervisor, I would take that forward and ensure that we provide public health funds to those who are suffering. And I want to acknowledge and mention the last point. Dean, you have no idea what my family has come from. My family left a dictatorship behind to move here. We grew up in student housing. They broke into the middle class. I moved to this city to get a better life. My family moved to the city to get a better life. Don't insult my family. They've gotten so much done for me. And that's the community that
I Supervisor?
Thanks. I don't know what was insulting your family. I think I commented on the fact that you put $600,000 into your last failed campaign. Anyway, I thank you for asking the question, and I'm very proud to be endorsed by the Harvey Milk Democratic Club and have been in every race that I've run for office, in part because some of the issues we're talking about, and actually fighting for housing that the community can afford here in San Francisco, and standing up to real estate speculators. And if you look at part of the legacy of Harvey Milk, it was not just holding police accountable, which apparently is controversial, but it was also being very clear on standing up to real estate speculation and greed. I'm very proud to represent the Trans District, very proud to represent the Tenderloin. One of the first things that we did was actually to move across the finish line, landmarking of the Compton's Cafeteria riot site. And I also happen to have grown up 2 blocks from Stonewall. So it's really an honor to represent the
Thank you very much. Alan?
Why in the world are we discussing this subject? You mean to tell me that it's a major problem that trans can't be protected in San Francisco? If that's the problem, we got real problem. Because people who are trans run to San Francisco for help. So if we are aware of this, I'm sure we can help this community out. I just don't believe that it's as big of a problem as many people are making it to be. The thing is the trans community also needs to step up its game to help itself.
Scotty?
I'm gonna be gentle. Let me be very clear. The problems that face the trans community are very real problems. Very real problems. They are public safety problems, they are housing problems, they are the same exact problems that affect every single other San Franciscan. In fact, many times disproportionately so. And the insinuation, while I don't think was intended to be harmful, I personally take a little bit of offense to. I am the only queer candidate up here. I'm the only queer candidate that was endorsed in a supervisor race by the Alice B. Toklas LGBTQ Democratic Club this cycle. In my first campaign, I'm very proud of that. To me, San Francisco is a bastion for people who are looking to live authentic lives. That has been part of my experience. I know that is the experience of others. We have a lot of work to do on public safety for LGBTQ folks. I have a friend who's a drag queen, 3 weeks ago was attacked in San Francisco. That's in our city. We have a lot of work to do. It starts with public safety and the myriad other topics that affect every San Franciscan.
So we are going to move on to some questions that have to do with, once again, crime and drugs in the city. Bilal, we'll start with you with this one. What is your position on Proposition F's requirement that people suspected of being on drugs must agree to screening, testing, and treatment to get benefits?
Yes.
Proposition F, which was passed in March.
I didn't support Proposition F because, again, like I stated before, this is a supply side problem. There are millions of dollars that are going through the fentanyl market in the Tenderloin. I'll walk past it when I go home today on 7th and McAllister. Millions of dollars, that's not millions of dollars that are being spent by people suffering on our streets. That's millions of dollars that are being spent from drug dealers selling to other drug dealers. And that's how you end the opioid market. That's how you get people into recoveries, by cutting off the supply, shutting down the open air drug markets. And that's why I proposed the drug market intervention plan. It's the only plan that has worked across the country, successfully ending opioid markets in Nashville, Tennessee, and High Point, North Carolina. It's being tested in Philadelphia as well right now. And that's what I'll be focusing on. That's what I'm going to do when supervisor.
Thank you. Supervisor?
Yeah, I didn't support Prop F, and for the reasons I said before, don't think that kind of punitive approach to people who have drug addiction, I think it's counterproductive, it really is. And it's a form of what we see too often, especially during an election year, which is punching down on those who are struggling. It's something I will never do. I don't want to win office by punching down on those who are vulnerable. We have put forward and called for the city to actually use the 4 pillars model that has been successfully used in Zurich, and are anticipating a budget and legislative analyst report on that. Highly successful, but just like our local overdose prevention plan, it has in it something that is politically hard, and that is overdose prevention sites. They are the cornerstone of our overdose prevention plan. They are the cornerstone of the successful 4 pillars model in Zurich. We have got to do it and move forward and open those sites across the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan?
I have absolutely no plan for dealing with this issue. I myself have suffered in my family through substance abuse. Those who got clean did it because they wanted to get clean, myself included. And so, as hard as it is, if you don't want help, I can't help.
Scotty?
I did vote in favor of Prop F. Because I believe that Prop F is part of the myriad tools that we need to put in place to ultimately compel and create the right incentives to go seek treatment. I do not think Prop F gets the job done on its own. I think it is part of a total solution. But I do not believe that we are going to just arrest our way out of the addiction challenges that people are facing on our streets. However, requiring people to submit to screening is a step along the recovery process. And I've talked to people who are in recovery now who have specifically said that going into places where they knew that they were going to be in sober living environments, where they weren't going to be surrounded by people who were still struggling with staying in and out of recovery, that is how you ultimately get people down the path towards recovery. I agree this is a supply side problem. I agree we need to pass Prop 36. I agree that we need to create a carve out for undocumented drug dealers who are poisoning San Franciscans.
Thank you very much.
I believe we need to stand with law enforcement. Thank you.
So I did vote for Proposition F, and it's not because I wanted people to pee in a cup before they got their checks. A lot of times, I want to make sure that if there's someone who's behaving erratically in the hallways, that we have options to get them into treatment. And right now, it looks like that drug testing might end up looking like a questionnaire, just so you know. I don't think we can solve this by just cutting supply. I think we need to cut demand too, and that does mean compelling treatment in many cases. We need to do this to protect our neighborhoods. And let me talk with you real quick about overdose prevention sites. If overdose prevention sites worked, we ran one in 2022. This is what it looked like. This is what overdoses looked like in 2022 in San Francisco. If they work in the Tenderloin, where we ran the drug prevention site, you should see overdoses dropping in the Tenderloin. But look, 2022 is stable both for the city and for the Tenderloin. I don't think these overdose prevention sites are working, and I would not rely too heavily on them.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to stick with another proposition that was passed in March, Proposition E. We'll start with you, Supervisor. What is your position on allowing the use of cameras and drones to detect and reduce crime here in the city?
Thank you. We just voted for the recent policy that was at the board on drones after we worked with the police department to make sure that there were some protections to protect against monitoring of First Amendment activity. And again, this is a role that I understand Prop E was really driven by trying to remove police oversight in our city, trying to weaken the power of San Francisco's Police Commission. I voted against Prop E. I fundamentally disagree. We have got to have oversight of a police department, and if you do what we're doing in San Francisco, you just continue to give tens and hundreds of millions of dollars to a department regardless of their case closure rates, their response times, how they deploy their overtime resources, and any racial inequities in how they police. If you do that without oversight, it doesn't end well, and it's not going well right now. We need police oversight as part of our public safety work in San Francisco.
Thank you. Alan?
I supported Prop E. I saw the video of the red card. I don't know whether any of you have seen it, where the drone tracked this red car and they caught the thieves who broke into another car. And it was impressive. It made me proud to say I supported this technology. And there's an awful lot more technology that I believe that we can use. And we should not shy away from technology in helping us in capturing the bad guy. I need to mention on Prop 36, I do not support this measure, and anybody who supports it should read Mission Local. What's going on in our jail system, you don't want to put one more jail person in jail unless we
Thank you,
solve
Alan.
that.
Scotty?
I did support Prop E. Because to me, a fully funded SFPD is not just about more officers, it is not just about enhancing recruitment tactics, it is about completing the public safety toolkit, a critical piece of which is investing in technology. And I know there was a stat thrown out, it sounded like you were maybe taking credit for some of the reduction in car break-ins. Ultimately, the reduction in car break-ins is a function of the fact that we finally have surveillance technology. We finally have the ability to have deterrence, looking for when the break-ins are occurring and shortening the amount of time between when someone commits a crime and when they're ultimately apprehended. It is when you have a DA like Brooke Jenkins who is willing to charge when she gets, no, Brooke Jenkins, I will say it, Chesapeake was one of the worst things to happen in San Francisco, and Brooke Jenkins is doing her job. We finally have 2 of the 3 legs of the law enforcement apparatus in place. We have police who now are empowered to arrest. We have a district attorney who will charge. And soon, we will hopefully have judges who will convict. And that is how you get crime to go down in a city like San Francisco.
I did vote for Proposition E. I think it's important to have, I wanted the police department to have access to drones so they could solve crimes. We've been seeing a lot of property crime in the city, and we've been having this problem where we have been forced to choose between doing a car chase and doing nothing at all. And too often the answer is to do nothing at all. Because when we do a car chase, we put pedestrians at risk. Now that we have drones, we can follow criminals back to where they came from and oftentimes find places, things they've stolen from other people. We can solve a lot of crimes that were not possible to solve before because we didn't have those resources. I think it's important to protect the people of San Francisco from property crimes and other crimes, and that's why I voted for Proposition E, because we can use technology to offset some of the understaffing issues of the police department and to keep our people safe. And I think that's the duty of any supervisor, is to keep their district safe.
Thank you. Bilal?
I supported Proposition E. It wasn't a perfect measure. It didn't believe in some of the components around car chases, but the camera network, that was extremely vital and fundamental to the security of the Tenderloin. You talk to any small business and any community group there, they have benefited immensely from the ability for the police to use that camera network to actually get crime solved. But I think a fundamental difference between me and Dean here is that you can't hold the police accountable unless you have a functioning relationship with them. If you're constantly threatening to defund their police department, we can keep the police staffing under the existing budget that's there. You don't need to reduce it. But when you do that, you develop a dysfunctional relationship, and that's why we don't have any beat patrol officers in the Tenderloin. We have not had an advocate for collaborating with the police department to do so. That's what this district needs. That's why I'm also supporting Prop F on the current ballot, which is a consensus measure between Supervisor Peskin and Supervisor Dorsey to help us get our retired cops as more beat officers exclusively. It's a 5-year measure.
Thank you very much. And this question actually kind of jumps off of what Bilal was just talking about, and we'll start with you, Alan, on this one. What is your view on community policing and its role in public safety?
I support it. As a matter of fact, police officers that I talk to on the streets that I'm going about, sharing what I've seen and stuff like that, I couldn't do it if they're in their police car. The fact that we have police walking the beat, I feel safer. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't feel unsafe in the Tenderloin. I feel safe. I really do. I see the challenges, but I also see that the police do need another eye. And by you communicating with the police in a friendly manner, I think that it'll do an awful lot more to help them embrace this type of policing.
Thank you. Scotty?
I'll say community policing doesn't work if there isn't a police force as a part of that equation. And so I do believe, as I've said, we need a fully funded police department, partially so that we can make sure that communities like the Tenderloin, where I was speaking with a group of about 30 or so neighbors there last Friday, who all said, we used to have beat officers in this neighborhood. We used to know who those beat officers were. We used to be able to go to them and say, hey, something's not right here, you need to check it out. And that was if those officers hadn't already noticed something was amiss themselves. But when we have an understaffed police department, we can talk about record level police funding levels and how much is going to overtime. You don't pay overtime if you have a fully staffed police department. You don't pay overtime if you're able to successfully recruit officers, but we are not even putting our police force in a position right now to be competitive on a regional basis. When you have Alameda County, Contra Costa County, Marin County offering $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 sign-on bonuses, and we're offering our officers $5,000 sign-on bonuses to be overworked in places like the Tenderloin, where they are then prone to making mistakes. That is not successful investment in public safety.
I would be surprised if there's anyone at this table who does not support community policing, with good police officers, ideally from the neighborhood, who are building relationships with the people on the streets, not just with the small business owners, not just with the housed residents, but also with the unhoused residents. And I think we do need to fully staff our police in order to make that happen. And part of that is working to make sure we don't burn out the police we already have. We are currently losing officers at a high rate, and it's really hard to fully staff the police department. It's hard to fill a leaky bucket, right? We're losing police officers as fast as we can bring them in. I do think we need to put an emphasis on recruitment and bring in people ideally from the neighborhood to join our police staff.
Thank you. Bilal?
I talked about the need for beat patrol officers and how important it is, but let me talk about the consequences of not having them. My friend George was about to open his restaurant, Quebec, in Hayes Valley. I'm sure many of you have been there. The night before they opened, they were broken into and all his liquor was stolen. The reason is because in Hayes Valley, there are some beat officers that are there on overtime. They're not fully funded. So that they're at intermittent hours. The criminals who break into these businesses know when the beat patrols are out and they know when they're gone, and as a result, they're able to come in when they know they're gone. The Merchant Association in Hayes Valley had to compensate for the lack of officers by setting up a WhatsApp group to warn the other businesses when a beat patrol was gone and whether a criminal was likely to come. That is not the state of a functioning public safety in a neighborhood. That is a state of a lack of options and a failure on the aspect of the city hall to ensure safety in there, and we have to ensure that we get the beat patrols back in every neighborhood and nearly every
Thank you very much. Supervisor?
Thank you. It sounds like a lot of folks up here have some issues with the mayor and the police chief. I hope you will share that with them. I've been here 30 years in San Francisco. Every community, we've always been saying we want the police out of their cars and walking the beat. They do it for a while, and they're back in their cars, not walking the beat and claim they need more staff. That has been going on as long as I have been in this city. So yes, beat cops rather than being in their vehicle. But let's talk for a second about the car break-in issue that you raised, because I think it's relevant here, and getting cops out of their cars was part of how we actually cracked it. And yes, For years in this city, there were 75 car break-ins reported a day, and nothing was being done differently about it. We, a year ago, called for a hearing, shined a public spotlight on it, found through our request for information that the embarrassing stat that only 1% of those cases was being closed. It has nothing to do with who was the DA. It had to do with the fact that nothing was being done in a coordinated way. Departments weren't even talking to each other. We got departments talking to each other, collaborating.
Thank you very much.
And we have a 50% drop in car break-ins.
So speaking of the mayor, we have a mayor's race, and as well that you're sharing the ballot with. Who are you supporting for mayor, and why do you think they would be an effective partner for you if you're the District 5 supervisor? We'll start with Scotty.
Like I said, I'm supporting for mayor. I just want to say, the number of break-ins reported goes down when people stop reporting because they lose faith in their ability to get a response from the police, because the police are not there to respond to the issues, because the police are systemically understaffed. So I'll put that there. I'm supporting Mark Farrell for mayor, and the reason I'm supporting Mark Farrell for mayor is because he's the longest-serving budget chair in San Francisco history. This city is on track for an $800 million budget deficit next year, a $2.1 billion deficit after that. I have had 6 years of London Breed to know I don't need another 4. I don't need Daniel Lurie to take his first crack at running San Francisco in room 200. I would love to see him in 4 or 8 years, though, depending on what happens this year. So, I am proud to stand with Mark Farrell. Mark Farrell is an advocate for universal childcare. He is an advocate for a fully staffed police department. He is an experienced leader. He is a Democrat. And he is someone who is ultimately going to be a steady hand through uncertain times for San Francisco.
Thank you. Autumn?
I'm actually undecided on the mayor's race, probably like many of you out there. But what I will tell you is I am fully committed to working with whoever it is who wins that office. I will have a good relationship with whoever it is, because when you are the supervisor of your district, you're not actually in control of the police. You're not actually in control of the planning department. You're not actually in control of really anyone except a couple staffers. Honestly. And if you're going to get anything done in this city, you have to work through the mayor, and you have to have good relationships with people in every department. I think that is key. I'm not taking a position on who should be in the mayor's office. I'm only taking a position saying that I will work with you, whoever you are, in the mayor's office, and I will make sure we get things done together.
Thank you. Bilal?
I'm supporting Mayor Breed because she is the most pro-housing and pro-transit leader in this city. Just look at the propositions on the ballot. Aaron Peskin does not support Proposition K. Mayor Breed does. Mark Farrell does not support getting cars back on Market Street. Mayor Breed does not. Mayor Breed supports building housing at all levels. She's been one of the most consistent YIMBY candidates in recent memory. Daniel Lurie does not. On every issue that matters to District 5, Mayor Breed is on the right side of history. I don't agree with her on everything, but I agree with her on the community and how they view her. She grew up in this district. She knows this district. The community is behind her, and that's what we have to acknowledge. And we need a supervisor who's willing to collaborate with the mayor. Honestly, I don't drink, but if I did and I took a shot every time Dean Preston blamed the mayor for every one of his challenges, I'd probably be a little tipsy by the end of this night. But thankfully I don't drink. But we need a supervisor who's going to collaborate with the mayor.
Thank you very much, Supervisor.
Thank you very much. I don't know how you can build your entire campaign around calling for change and new leadership and then back London Breed, the most powerful figure in the city. It's just a complete disconnect. I am backing Aaron Peskin, who I've worked with on the Board of Supervisors. He has been a fighter for tenants and for rent control, and I've partnered with him on those efforts. I've also found him to be actually serious about government oversight in ways that are desperately needed right now with the corruption that's rampant in the administration. And finally, I will say this, whatever people think of Aaron Peskin, and I don't agree with him on everything, but I will say this, he is not controlled by a bunch of billionaires who are trying to take over the city. Alan?
The problem in this district is the animosity between Dean Preston and London Breed. If both were re-elected, you can forget about change. I I'm saying the reason why I'm up here is because I support freedom. The animosity between these two is not repairable. I am also allergic to political animus. So if you think that you're going to get something done here, you can't have them both. And I know some of you would prefer to have Dean Preston over London Breed. I disagree.
Thank you very much. So this will be our last question before we go to the closing statements from the candidates. And since we're in the main library, I think we'll end on maybe some arts and culture. The city recently reached an agreement with the producers of Outside Lands to have additional concerts and events that they will hold. Obviously that will have a big impact on certain residents of District 5. Where do you stand on that, and would you want to see even more types of events like that in your district? And we'll start with Autumn.
I think we have some of the best and most historic neighborhoods in the city, and I would love to see events like this in every single one of our neighborhoods. I want the Fillmore to be celebrating the Fillmore. I want the hate to be celebrating the hate, and I want lower hate to be celebrating lower hate. I want, I want everyone to be celebrating, and of course, like the Tenderloin should not celebrate the Tenderloin. I feel like I'm leaving someone out here, and I'm going to be embarrassed later. But every neighborhood should have celebrations that invites, I would love to see it, okay, I think of us as a village, okay? People always say, District 5 has all these competing priorities, all these different people. How can you possibly govern something when people want such different things? And I'm like, no, that's not how it works. We are a village, we have different talents, we have different ideas, and we're stronger for that diversity. We should be inviting each other to our neighborhood events. People, I want to see more people from the Fillmore at the Hayes Carnival. I want to see more people at the Haight-Ashbury Street Fair from the Tenderloin. I think the more we work together, the more we talk to each other, the better the city is going to be.
Bilal?
Absolutely, sounds like a great idea. I mean, who went to Fred again in front of Civic Center? It's fun, right, Scotty?
Yeah.
We need more of those events, and I think to sustain those types of events, we need to rethink what our downtown looks like. I've advocated for revitalizing downtown, converting offices into universities and campuses and teacher housing and student housing and classrooms. This is how New York recovered post 9/11, is having universities invest in their downtown. I want to do the same as Supervisor, to invite them to come here. The mayor has a great plan, 30 by 30, to bring 10,000 students here to downtown in the next 10 years. And that's how we sustain our businesses, our small businesses, our restaurants, our nightlife, is we make sure that students can live here and afford to live here and thrive in San Francisco. We can remake the new industries here of arts and culture and art schools and climate schools. That's how we recover downtown. That's how we sustain our nightlife, and that's how we get Fred again back.
Thank you.
Fred again.
Thank you. Yes to Outside Lands, yes to outdoor music, yes to indoor music, and I will just say, as I mentioned before, former co-owner of Cafe du Nord, very proud of that. Also lesser known, the curator with another neighborhood resident of one of the longest standing acoustic music showcases at Club Wazima for many, many years. I have been supporting musicians. I'm a complete music lover, supporting musicians and artists and representing them and making sure that they can actually continue to live in our city. I will say this, we can't just focus on downtown. There are a lot of plans and I applaud a lot of them, but we need to be supporting live music and street activations and fairs. We have some of the best street fairs in District 5 all across the district. Hopefully you're all out enjoying those. It's really a source of pride for me as your supervisor. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan?
I agree with all.
Can I have this time? No, just kidding. Look, this is one of the biggest economic engines that we can be investing in as a city. I have been the loudest and most frequent advocate for investing in live music and entertainment in San Francisco of anyone up here. I am the only one calling for a 4 a.m. last call. I'm the only one calling for expanding things, yes, like more concerts like the Fred Again show, because you know what? Beyond just that being a great time, and yes, I was there, that was 25,000 people, many of whom were not from San Francisco, who took transit. who came to San Francisco, who spent $150 a person to buy a ticket to go to that show, there is a tremendous amount of economic capital tied up in entertainment, and we need to do a better job, and as your supervisor, it will be a top priority for me to make sure that venues like the Hibernia are not dealing with public safety crises on their streets. They're dealing with crowds that are too big and sell out shows. That is how you get downtown going again. It's how you get young people living downtown. It's how you build a completely different version of downtown San Francisco.
So Bilal, we'll start with you. Once again, you have a minute for your closing statement.
Thank you again, everyone, for being here, and all the communities from Hayes Valley to Nopna to Lorraine Merchant Association for hosting us. I'll close by noting that this election is a once-in-a-decade opportunity for change. Our district is the heart of San Francisco. It gave my family a sense of belonging and the promise of housing and small business and economic opportunity. But we have to acknowledge that we have significant challenges and not bury our head in the sand. We're not a national punching bag because of our values. We're a national punching bag because of our failed leadership to address our challenges. So to deny that is to deny the pain of our families and the children in the communities, the loved ones we have lost to displacement and violence and overdose. We need leaders who are going to do the work, who don't tell the community no to addressing these challenges, and we have to focus on ensuring that we build more housing at all levels, address our fentanyl crisis, address our public safety crisis, to ensure that we have a city that says yes to building all of these things. I've been endorsed by the Democratic Party, by our building trades, by our carpenters, groups that don't always agree with one another, but they agree that I'm the candidate to bring change.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. And I think we've heard some interesting ideas from some of the folks up here and some baseless attacks and empty promises from the fellow to my right. I'll just say that we've got a real record of actually getting things done in the district. There is plenty more to do, absolutely, but we're making progress. And I want to highlight a few of those things. We have banned evictions of small businesses and residents during the pandemic. We opened a family shelter of 58 rooms so that folks didn't have to sleep on the floor of a basement of a church with their kids. We reduced street homelessness in our district by 21%. We raised over $300 million for affordable housing by taxing the mega rich. We created the city's first overdose prevention plan, saved crucial food programs for budget cuts, reduced car break-ins by 50%, created a right to counsel for tenants facing eviction, and brought community ambassadors to every District 5 neighborhood. Thanks so much for being here this evening. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Alan.
In July, I received a newsletter from Dean Preston's office. In that newsletter, it bragged about the monies that he got put back into the budget. I added it up. It's about $53 million. Then I reread it. The word senior and disabled is nowhere in that document. Check it out. Then I found out he voted against the same budget he was bragging about all the money he got into it. That type of animosity between him and the mayor is going to have you all suffer under his leadership, and she's re-elected, or someone who has similar views as London Breed. I'm telling you, animosity is going to destroy this city.
Thank you, Alan. Scotty?
So look, I'm here, again, as the youngest supervisor candidate across the entire city this cycle, because I looked up and realized that if I wanted to see change in a city that I care so much about, sharing things to Instagram just wasn't going to do it anymore. I had to get involved, I actually had to do something. And so regardless of if you agree with my policies or not, this is an invitation to get behind change. This is an invitation to get behind new policies, new vision, new ideas, and a new generation of political leaders who are going to help build a San Francisco for future generations of San Franciscans. There were a lot of people who told me when I launched my campaign, you have no shot. There are a lot of people on this stage tonight with a lot more money and big organizations backing them. I will tell you this, if you go drive around District 5, if you go talk to people in District 5, I really believe we have built momentum here. And I know we've built momentum because when I go door knock, when we phone bank, when I'm at the farmers markets in the mornings, we hear it. And so, if you want change in San Francisco, don't vote for more of the same.
Thank you very much.
Vote for change.
Autumn?
track record of getting things done for District 5. I refocused the school board on getting results for our kids because that's what changes lives. I brought back algebra so our kids can grow up to be scientists and engineers even if their families don't have the money to buy them special math classes during the summer. Now, I think a lot of you are going to disagree with you on this, but I think one of the big differentiators between the people up here at this table is that I do support Prop 36 because I prioritize the security of Tenderloin families. And Prop 36 is going to help us get drug users into treatment. I believe the kids at the Tenderloin have a right to walk to school without seeing crack pipes and shit and women with their pants down discarded on our streets. And as the only person up here who's walked the Tenderloin in a dress, as far as I know, I understand why the women of the Tenderloin now carry mace. We need to fix this. Prop 36 will give us the tools we need to get drug users into treatment and restore the influence of San Francisco on our nation and on our world.
Thank you. Audience, now's your chance. We can have a round of applause for all the candidates. And we also give a round of applause to the organizers who put this together. And thank you for behaving as best as you could handle tonight. And please don't forget to vote by November 5th. Tell all your friends, family. It's a really important year, even though you've heard that how many times?